Hey all, welcome back to Cult of Film. Today I want to review a movie that had come up recommended because I'm a huge Andrei Tarkovsky fan. Those of you that are cinephiles know who Andrei Tarkovsky is. Maybe the greatest filmmaker to have ever have lived. This movie, Ordet, by Carl Theodor Dreyer, who I believe was a Danish filmmaker. He wrote and directed this film. 1955, black and white, 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I know that Rotten Tomatoes rankings can be sort of divisive. In general, I tend to agree with them. There's a fair amount of movies we have reviewed for this channel that are super low rated on Rotten Tomatoes, not necessarily because they're bad films, but they're films that have been sort of talked down so nobody reviews them. So I guess the total reviews for certain films are not high, but this 100% rating from Rotten Tomatoes for Ordet is absolutely correct and earned. Ordet is it's a 1955 Danish drama film directed again by Carl Theodor Dreyer, based on a play. And the way it's staged, you can kind of tell if any of you are theater goers or have been theater actors or like theater, you can tell the way it's staged and framed feels very much like an Ibsen play. The film won the Golden Lion at the 16th Venice International Film Festival. That's how long ago this was. And the film centers around the Borgen family. And they live in rural Denmark. And it's the autumn of 1925. The devout widower Morten, patriarch of the family, a prominent member of the community and patron of the local parish church, has three sons. Mikkel, the eldest, who has lost his faith, but is happily married to his pious wife Inger, who is pregnant with their third child. And then there's Johannes, who was inspired by the Holy Spirit after studying Soren Kierkegaard and believes himself to be the second coming of Jesus Christ. And he kind of wanders the farm throughout the film. There's also a daughter, youngest son, Anders, who is lovesick. He's a kid. He's a neighbor kid who is lovesick for the daughter. Anders is also the son of the same family, and he's lovesick for the daughter of a leader of a local mission sect. And so you've got the patriarchal father. You've got the eldest son who sort of lost his faith, but he's happy with his pregnant wife, who is also pious. Then you have the other son, Johannes, who thinks he's the second coming of Christ, and the youngest son who, he's sort of like full of hope and light, and he's lovesick for a young woman whose father doesn't really want her to marry him. And basically the film, I will spoil it here. So if you haven't watched this movie, I strongly, strongly, strongly encourage you to pause now, go to criterionchannel.com, subscribe, and watch this film because it's so good, or rent it. Basically what happens is let's see if I can explain this without ruining it for you guys. Something terrible happens within the family, and it really rocks everyone. It reinforces Mikkel's lack of faith. It really hurts, obviously, the patriarch father, Morten. The son, Johannes, who thinks he's Christ, seems to try to comfort everyone, saying that everything is going to be all right, but everybody's too busy dealing with the reality of this terrible loss. And all the while, Anders is trying so hard to get the blessing of his love's fathers to basically get permission to marry her, and eventually gets his father to talk with this man and try to wear him down. This movie is so beautiful. It's one of those extremely dignified European quasi-religious dramas. Again, in the vein, this so much feels like it could have been an Ibsen play. Henrik Ibsen, the great playwright. And again, beautifully shot, beautifully composed and framed. You get a little annoyed with Johannes, who thinks he's Jesus, and you sort of follow them dealing with this loss in their family. And what's beautiful is you can sort of see everybody's point of view. you can see where Mikhail is coming from. It's like, okay, why should I believe in God if he allows these terrible things to happen? You could see this, the older man, the patriarch of the family, Morton, trying to hold his family together, trying to appeal to his son who has lost his faith, trying to keep his son, who might be the second coming of Christ, might be mentally ill, trying to keep him from wandering off the farm, all the while trying to sit down with his son and this local pastor and trying to make the case of why his son should be allowed to marry his daughter, despite the fact that this pastor really doesn't feel it. So there's so much going on, and you really feel everyone's point of view. Maybe everyone's except Johannes, because Johannes, he feels like he's the one that's the most difficult to relate to, again, because he thinks he's the second coming of Christ, and I don't know how anybody relates to that, but you see the point of view of Mikhail. You see the point of view of Morton, the patriarch. You see the point of view of young Anders, who just wants to start his life. He loves this woman. He's full of energy. He wants to start his life and unite these, these two parts of town, these two families, via his love for this woman. And then, of course, the Mikhail's wife, who is dealing with a pregnancy. She's sort of like the purest character in the film. It's just so beautifully done. I don't know. I don't really have the words to describe it. The fact that it's a truly earned 100% from Rotten Tomatoes. This is an absolute classic. I'm so glad I found this film. I'm sorry that it took me so long to get around to it, because I watched Tarkovsky's Solaris back in like 2011, 2012, early days of Netflix, and for whatever reason I didn't finish it. And then it would be 7 or 8 years later that I would go down the rabbit hole, watch all of Tarkovsky's works, fall in love with him, realize that he is the greatest filmmaker maybe to ever have lived. And that led me to Carl Theodor Dreyer's work. And I've watched 2 of his films so far. A bunch of his stuff is on Criterion Channel. We talk about Criterion Channel. That's the streaming service for the Criterion Collection, which are all of those sort of hand-picked great films, international film, genre film, cult film, that are sort of preserved in the collection. So worth your time. I believe it's like $10.99 or $11.99 a month. It might be a little bit more now. But if you're a film person, if you're a cinephile, and you don't have a Criterion Channel membership, do yourself a favor. There's such great stuff there. And I'm slowly going through Dreyer's filmography. I watched Ordet, and then I watched his first film called Vampire, Vampyr, which is so ahead of its time. It's a 1920s sort of horror film, but again, beautifully done, obviously shot in black and white, very kind of stagey, but in a good way. And Dreyer is becoming sort of next to Tarkovsky for me. So I highly recommend Ordet. If there's one movie of his that you watch, it seems that Ordet really is sort of one of his magnum opus films. And it's pretty much universally, for people who know film, regarded as a masterpiece. And again, it has sort of like this. It sort of starts out a little dry, but then it grabs you. There's something the way Dreyer films, again, like Tarkovsky, the way he frames a shot, the way he frames a scene, that's really sort of hypnotic, and it pulls you in. And I didn't blink once watching Ordet. So do yourself a favor, even if you don't like foreign films, you don't like black and white films, you don't like older films, and you don't necessarily have to be a believer or a religious person. I'm not a religious person at all, but I do love some of these great masterpieces that clearly were influenced by people who were religious. Tarkovsky was a very convicted Orthodox Christian, and while he doesn't necessarily preach any overt Christian messages in any of his films, there's a spirituality, a universal spirituality that comes through in all of his films. And that very much comes through in Dreyer's Ordet as well. Again, you could be an atheist, you can be a believer and still be spiritual. And again, because so many of these stories, like the story of Christ or the story of Moses or whatnot, whether you are a believer or not, or religious, these are things that are baked into the culture. and they're just so beautifully done. When they are done right. And again, Ordet means the word in Danish, and the word usually Christ is referred to as the word, and or sometimes the message, depending on your Abrahamic religion. But I love this movie so much. This probably deserves a maybe deeper analysis, but maybe not. I don't want to ruin too much for you. I've actually done a really good job of not addressing the tragedy that befalls this family that really pushes things in motion and that just drags you all the way to the end. And what a satisfying ending it is. Really, absolute payoff too. So while about 126 minutes, so a little over 2 hours. And again, we'll sit and watch 3-hour Avengers movies. You can watch something like this. You come out of this movie just feeling enriched and sort of spiritually nourished. At least I did. So this one is it's in my top 10, if not maybe my top 5 of all time. And I just saw this movie a month or two ago. So Ordet by Carl Theodor Dreyer, streaming on the Criterion channel. It's worth your time. If any of you out there are fans of Dreyer, are fans of this movie, comment below what else besides Ordet or Vampire should I watch next. And again, I'm going to watch all of this stuff, but I'd love to connect with people who love Ordet, love Dreyer, and certainly who love Tarkovsky. And at some point, we're going to do all of Tarkovsky's films. I just have to find somebody who's going to be willing to sit with me and watch all of them together, and we'll break them down one by one. But in the meantime, we're going to go through Dreyer because I've seen all of Tarkovsky's films. So yeah, that was another short one, guys. Check out Ordet. It's so worth it. One of the best films I've ever seen. Absolute masterpiece. Absolutely deserving of 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And if you've stayed with me this far, please like, subscribe, share, comment below. Tell us if there's anything else you guys want us to review. If there's stuff like this, like Ordet or others that you think we should check out, let me know. And we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, guys.